Curated Life podcast. Thanks for joining me. This is a little bit of a unique setup today. Mother, I can't even get this right. It's just me, which is not most of the episodes, but one of my goals for the podcast this year is to do a little bit more of just the solo ones. I had a lot of really cool interactions with people based on the solo ones I did last year, which were not very many. So I'm hoping to do more of that this year. And if you were watching on YouTube, instead of just listening to the audio, I'm going to be organizing through some clothes while I do this, because if you are like me at all with your life, you know that you can't just do one thing at one time most of the time. It just logistically does not work. So here we are trying to get our life together. I wanted to talk about something today that's really relevant to me, and that is being overwhelmed. I don't typically feel overwhelmed. I'm not somebody who feels overwhelmed easier by my own estimation, and I guess that's all relative. Like, feeling overwhelmed easily, what that means to different people would be different depending on who you are. The reason I don't think I am is because for a long time, like since I was in high school, I always had a lot going on, like working in organizations, getting good grades. Like, I'm talking about high school and college. I was always like really involved with different organizations, working at the same time, getting good grades, the whole thing. And it was doable. And it's not that I never felt overwhelmed, because obviously there were times where I would be like, ooh, I'm pretty stressed out right now. I can remember being in high school thinking that I was gonna get an ulcer because of how often my stomach hurt from stress. So I'm not saying I was always immune to feeling the anxiety of having too much going on, and that's not what I'm saying now. I can remember talking to my mom about it in high school and her being like, okay, you've got to find a way to calm down, because if you continue to, like, if you feel this sharp pain in your stomach, and we're pretty sure that this is like your acidity from stress, like stress-induced acidity in your stomach, you will eventually, like, it will eat a hole in your stomach lining. So in high school, I remember, having a lot going on or whatever, but it was probably like typical for an ambitious high schooler. Like, I think relatively I have more going on now for a 31-year-old woman than I had going on then for a high school aged girl, if that makes sense. So I do think that tolerance to stress does come with time a little bit. Like, you stay stressed long enough, it starts to feel normal. I'm not saying that's a good thing, and that's not what I'm going to talk about today. So today I was feeling overwhelmed this morning, which is kind of what inspired me to talk about this, because I need to hear it just as much as the next person. I've so many balls in the air, which is kind of adulthood, right? Like, even the most simple versions of being a grown-up, there's a lot going on. There's a lot to juggle, because you will have most likely bills. Like, let's say you're not in a romantic relationship, you don't have kids, you don't have pets, you still have to live somewhere. And even if you lived with your parents, then you'd have to deal with complicated things on that front. So, being an adult, there's always going to be multiple balls in the air. But specifically, if you start upping the ante a little bit, you go get your own place, you are in a romantic relationship, you have kids, you have pets, if you have a job, if you don't have a job, that's almost worse. Not having a job is probably more stressful than having a job. So the point being that it's very easily for things to start compounding. For me personally, I have my career, which is complicated. I am a real estate broker, so really all of my income is 100% commission. I've been that way since I got out of college. So I eat what I kill, and I like it that way. But basically, it makes you a business owner. And in addition to that, I have a team. So I have a higher licensure than a typical real estate agent. I'm a real estate broker, and I have a team that I run. And on top of that, I do real estate projects. So I'll flip houses time to time. I'm not a landlord because I've done that before and did not love that life. Dealing with tenants can be kind of a nightmare. And if I ever do rentals again, it's either going to be like luxury short-term rentals, or it's going to be, I'm going to have a property management company handling it for me, because I will not be doing that myself ever again. That was crazy. So that's my opinion there. But I also have a house that I'm renovating. That's very important to me. That is a place for me and my girls, but it's also hopefully will become a short-term rental as well, so that I can actually afford to carry it. And there's a lot of risk that goes into that, because it's a project that, if it fails, is going to hurt a lot. And then my current house, I'm trying to get permission to short-term rental this home, because when I go visit the other house, or when I go visit my parents or whatever, because I would like to do a little bit more adventuring with my children, I want to be able to offset the expenses with income from this house. And I actually have a hearing, like a public hearing, tomorrow morning to try to get permission to do that. And I've been jumping through 100 different hoops to make this happen. On top of that, I am a single working mother to 3 kids. One of the children I have 100% custody of. So it's just about a million things. And I'm sure a lot of people who are listening to this can relate on a lot of levels, and probably have other stressful things going on that are not similar to mine. Like maybe you have stressors in your family. And I guess I should also add that when I'm talking about running my own business, it's not just running my business, it's high stakes stuff that's very important to me, like making sure my clients' deals go smoothly. There's a lot of logistics that go behind making sure that my clients are taken care of really well, and that's very important to me. So there's the actual business running aspect of it, which you have to do to make any money when you have a business. But just as important, or even more important, you also have to, and will make no money if your clients aren't taken care of really well, and their stressors and their goals are extremely important to me, and the quality of the business that I'm doing is really important. So and I think a lot of people can relate to all of this, really. But other people might have stressors on the family side, or people in your life that are giving you a hard time, and like we've all been there too, right? But the point being is, how are you supposed to cope with this stuff? Like, it can be really hard to cope. And what happens to me is, I'm a really crappy sleeper, and I haven't had to worry about that too much, just here and there, because I'm so exhausted from sleep deprivation from having a newborn earlier last year, that a lot of times when I go to bed, I actually sleep. But there have been some times where that hasn't been the case, or my body's really used to not getting sleep and just is like, no, we're going to be awake, right? But like a couple nights ago, I did not get to sleep until after 2 a.m. I typically stay up late working and get up not super early, but maybe a little earlier than some other people to start the day, just because there's so much to do. But a couple nights ago, it was like way worse, getting to sleep way too late, and then I was up early before my alarm, like just ready to go. And it's just like stress and the adrenaline of it. Like there's so much to do. And so the first half of yesterday, I was really fine. I think from the adrenaline, I was just like, you know, kicking. But by the time late afternoon hit, I started feeling like, whoa, like, whoo, I feel a little unstable. I do not feel good. So I took an all natural sleep aid. I guess it was like a melatonin with something else. I don't know. Last night to try and help and I help me sleep. I'm like, I can't do, if I do another night of this not sleeping stuff, like there's gonna be a serious problem. So that's step one. If you're feeling really overwhelmed, it's affecting your sleep, try to get that straight. And I am the pot calling the kettle black there. I am not claiming that I have that figured out. I have the most unhealthy sleep habits probably of, you know, anyone. I'm terrible at getting enough sleep. Even when I don't have a baby that won't go to bed or a baby that's not sleeping at night, I on my own have terrible sleeping habits, and it's like one of the first things to get sacrificed when I have too much going on, because I just need more hours in the day. And like, you can't borrow them from anywhere else. You have to borrow them from your sleep. So I am preaching the choir on that one. Which I don't even know what that means, honestly, that saying. I just know that's the context to use it in. But first of all, prioritize your sleep. And that's me preaching to myself, like, try, Katerina, you have to get sleep. You function better and you will be more productive during the day if you get your sleep together. And I know that like when you've been staying up late to get stuff done over and over and over again, then when you go to bed at a normal time, you can't. Your brain's like, no, we're still supposed to be on right now. Take a sleep aid for a couple nights, go to bed early. And then also you could cut back your bedtime, cut it down like little bit, like by little bit, by little bit. So like each week you can have an earlier bedtime goal and then work on it over time. That's what I've done in the past when I needed to recoup a little more. Again, I'm not in that place. I'm doing a really bad job. The other thing that I do a really bad job of that I'm going to preach to you about is getting the right nutrition in your body. And the way that I do a bad job of that is that I just don't eat enough when I've got too much going on. It's another one of those things that just gets sacrificed so quickly because it's so easy to cut it out. And so I'll have breakfast and then either like not eat lunch until like 2:30 or 3 o'clock, or like have more of a snack on the go and then eat dinner later and then have like second dinner because I didn't get enough food in my body during the day. It's not good for you. We need to eat. And actually the story of breakfast being the most important meal of the day has actually been renounced. Lunch is the most important meal of the day, which I'm like, great, because that's the one that I skip constantly because it is the easiest to get away with skipping. And when you're running around like a crazy person, you don't even like notice the hunger so much because you're just trying to get stuff done. So, but for functioning well and for your brain to function well and your body to function well, you gotta eat. And eat good food, not just like crap on the go. So something I did today, because I was feeling so overwhelmed this morning, and I think something about like not getting enough sleep for a while and then eventually having last night where I slept a lot. I was in bed with the sleep aid before 9 p.m. and I didn't get up until 7, and I only woke up a little bit in the meantime. I think that also made me feel groggy, which is another bad side effect, that if you don't sleep enough for a long time, when you do get enough sleep, you feel really off because your brain and your body's like, I'm not really used to being shut down for that many hours. So it's you need the sleep, but it's actually really hard to function the next morning if you get a ton of sleep, I think, for me. when your body's not used to getting enough sleep, but I know that you need it, and later in the day you will feel better. But this morning I think I was feeling really overwhelmed. Like I didn't know what to tackle next. There were too many potential things, and my brain wasn't working really well, so I kept thinking that it was Thursday instead of Wednesday, which is not cool either. So I just like kind of shook myself a little bit, and I'm like, okay, here are a couple things that have to get done before I leave the house. I'm going to do these things. I'm going to drive over to where my appointment is this afternoon and sit down at an Indian restaurant and work at the table by myself. The reason for me it's Indian is because Indian is my comfort food. And that might be weird, or maybe a lot of people can relate to that, but that is my go-to comfort food, and you don't feel like crap after you eat Indian. Like if I'm having a really hard evening, I'll have like bedtime's going really badly with my kids, I'll order Indian to be delivered because I'm like, that'll give me something to really look forward to when this nightmare is over. So for me, Indian is the comfort food. So I went to an Indian restaurant by myself and worked. And sometimes it's that like change of atmosphere that helps, especially if you're working from home, because there's going to be so much in your environment that you could be dealing with. It's going to distract you from the other stuff you have to do. So you kind of need to choose, like, am I going to be in my house and take care of stuff in my house, or am I going to go somewhere where I can focus on the other things that need to happen? So that's what I did. Went to this Indian restaurant, ordered delicious food, knocked some important things out, and then moved on with my day. And from there, like, it was a lot smoother, and I knew exactly what needed to happen. And I had the day scheduled out past that point. It's just that this morning I had opened up to too many things. And that's another thing, is like scheduling your days in advance and have a specific, it's called time blocking. I'm sure everyone has heard of it, but really blocking off specific windows of time for specific things, so it's not up to you in the moment what to spend your time doing, and you're not jumping from one thing to another. That's not a helpful way to work. It's not productive, or it's not as productive. I'm not saying you can't be productive doing that, but it's better to focus on one area at a time and move, like finish a task and move to the next one. So that was part of my mistake, is I had not time blocked this morning appropriately, so I was a little lost on what to focus on, and then it becomes more overwhelming because you're like, oh my gosh, there's like 100 things commanding my attention right now. It's too much, and it is too much. One thing at a time, and maybe you need to get home early from work one day and focus on some stuff that needs to happen there. But that was my next step. It's also very tempting to turn to alcohol in those situations. Would not recommend. It's not going to help. I'm not saying I'm not going to have a drink later if it's offered to me, but I would suggest prioritizing getting in bed and getting some rest, getting an appropriate dinner over alcohol for sure. Other things would be yoga. There was a number of months ago, actually I can't believe how much time has already passed, but a number of months ago I was having a very stressful, I don't even know what to call it, season, time, whatever, where I was having to make a lot of really hard decisions, and that felt overwhelming. It was like decisions on many fronts about many things, and like all of them were hard. Like it was a lot to figure out and have to do and have to deal with, and it was like really weighing on me. So I would say for stressful situations that aren't like, oh, I have 1 million things to do, stressful situations that are more like, I have really hard decisions to make, that's a different kind of stress. Like right now, I don't have really hard decisions to make. I have a million things that need to get done. Totally different situation. But the kind of stress that's like, I have really difficult decisions to make. I cannot recommend enough doing a quick yoga routine. And I remember one evening specifically, I was feeling very overwhelmed by how heavy everything felt, and I just decided to do a little yoga. I think it was like a 30-minute yoga session. I just pulled them up on YouTube, and I needed that. Like, I needed to breathe deeper. I can remember at one point in the yoga routine, she said something like, press your hands on the floor, and like, it was something like, leave the weight of everything you're carrying in the floor. I don't remember exactly what she said, but I was like, like, it was like, oh my gosh, I need this. So I can't recommend that enough. If you're dealing with heavy stuff, doing a yoga routine that will help you just breathe and center your mind and like ground you a little bit. I think it's really helpful in those kinds of situations. And we need to be doing things like that because, like I mentioned earlier, if you don't, you're going to end up with a hole in your stomach. So it's important to not let that stuff just fester. You have to deal with it in some way. And like for me, being able to do the yoga routine led me to be able to voice out loud the stuff that was weighing on me, which is painful and it's hard, but it's also helpful, and it also helps you gain clarity. So I would say writing down what you're dealing with, like what the decisions are that you're making, why they're hard, and also voicing them out loud is so helpful and so important and helps you process. Because a lot of times we have really heavy decisions to make, and we actually do deep down know the right answer. That's not the problem. The problem is we don't want to know the right answer. And in my case, that was the situation with all the choices, with all the decisions I was trying to make. I knew deep down what the right calls were. I just didn't want that to be the case. I didn't want the right calls to be the right calls. I didn't want those to be the choices that I had to make, but they were, and there was nothing I could do about that. And if I didn't make those choices, I was going to be staying in a place mentally, emotionally, that wasn't as healthy as it could have been. So ultimately, it's like, we typically, now sometimes it's not so simple. Sometimes it's like, no, I really don't know. But the reality, I think, for most of the really hard decisions we have to make is that deep down in our gut, we do know what those decisions are supposed to be. We just don't want to. And that's okay. I get that feeling. That's hard. But I think writing out what you're feeling and what you're thinking and why it's hard can kind of help point us in that direction of what our knowing is. Glennon Doyle talks about it in her book. I don't even remember what her, right in this moment, I'm totally blanking on the name of the book, but Glennon Doyle, one of her most recent books, which actually came out years ago, but it's fantastic. She talks about your inner knowing and being in touch with that. And she is right. Like, we do have this inner knowledge of what is right for us and what we should be doing a lot of the time, but the answers aren't always the answers that we want. And we need to ask ourselves, why is this decision hard for me? Because the decision might be hard for you just because you don't actually want to do the thing that you know is the right call. So that's my thoughts on that. The other thing is, I would say, time blocking your evenings, which I did mention time blocking earlier, but I think I was more talking in the context of during the day, during the work day, during what's supposed to be productive hours. But honestly, in your evening, time blocking how much of that time is for work, how much is for your home, how much is for quality time with your people, because I think in the evenings we can get caught up on one thing. Maybe it's like dealing with something in your house or dealing with work or whatever. I'm never going to say dealing with hanging out with somebody. It's like quality time is very helpful. And for me as an extrovert, I need a certain amount of that. But also I do schedule it. It has to be planned out or it's not going to happen. So even though that might be or sound ridiculous, in the evenings, I'm not going to end up being able to spend time with anyone unless I literally put it on my schedule. So I have to schedule my work around those times and everything else. And the way I handle my schedule truly is first I schedule when I'm with my kids, because that's my first priority. So like the first thing that gets put on your schedule, that's the thing that's most important. And for me, it's my children. So truly, I look at my calendar, my schedule. The first thing is, when do I have my kids? Like, when are they not in school and they're with me? That's the first thing on there. And then everything else gets scheduled around that. So work and projects and stuff, personal life, that, and I'll have friends, but like romantic type of things, that are not going to happen around my kids, that all gets scheduled around them. So I would say my last bit of advice, thoughts that I'm going to share: look at your calendar, look at your schedule, ask yourself, what is the most important? Maybe rank your top 5 most important things in order and schedule accordingly. And don't make room for the other stuff. It's just, if you have a lot going on, that's not an option. So I personally have become more and more selfish with my time over the years, and it's actually allowed me to be more generous to the people and areas that are a priority. So like the people that I do really love, or that should get more time from me, they do, because it's literally a part of my calendar to do that. And other things are not going to take precedence or priority. So for me, I'd say it probably looks like kids are number 1, and then real estate work is second. And then I didn't think about this ahead of time, so I'm feeling a little put on the spot by myself. Like I feel like I'm putting myself on the spot a little more than necessary, but definitely kids, then work, then friends, then romance. I don't know that there's a number 5. Maybe my self-care, I could say there's a very, very small sliver of self-care that's not negotiable, and that's up there second to kids maybe. Like, I do regularly get my nails done. That's not negotiable. I'm not going to pass on that. That's happening no matter what. So, you know, it might be like kids, the few small self-care things that are non-negotiable, like nails and Botox, then work, even though I usually work while I'm getting my nails done, unless I do quality time with someone while I get my nails done, which is how I would prefer to do it, and then the other stuff. So anyway, it's not really important, but just giving that example of how I set my calendar up, I would really encourage you to look at your calendar and write it out and plan accordingly and figure out how much time you want to be dedicating to each of these things. And it might help you realize that you're dedicating more time to something that really shouldn't have it than you should. Like, maybe this is going to upset some people, but it just is what it is. Maybe you're spending a whole weekend day every single week visiting family, and there's always some drama or something when you do it. And it's like, maybe I don't need to be giving up 1 day out of 7 that I have every single week to this. Maybe it could be like 1 day a month, or, you know, whatever it is. Maybe you're putting more time into your house projects than you should. Probably not. But or like what's most likely, and what I've seen evolve in my own life, is that scheduling your kids' time with you around work is not the way to do it. Schedule time with them first, and then schedule everything else around that. And if you have to pay somebody else to cover for you in that time, do it if you can. I am not so privileged that I don't know that sometimes that's literally not an option. But just some advice, if you can help it. Good luck. Thank you so much for listening. I really love this community and this village that I get to connect with over this, and I appreciate anyone who listens and participates.